Hello, welcome back to another
Hi.
episode of Analyze Scripts. We are so excited to have you here. We are covering a big wig nominated film, Oppenheimer, today.
Mhm.
It's nominated for like basically everything.
100
Best
Oscars. I think
Picture,
13. Ooh.
13, lucky number 13, directed by Christopher Nolan. Cast is insanely incredible. It came
Mhm.
out the same day as Barbie, so Barbenheimer was that big
Yes.
fun
I'm so
box
glad we
office
decided to
breaking.
see Barbie,
Yeah, oh my gosh, yes.
right? Like, I don't know. This also is the longest movie of all time.
Yeah.
I don't think I
So
could, like, physically watch it in a theater.
so
Like,
what you're saying is that you preferred Barbie, which
yes.
same. Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that makes I don't think that'll be a shock to anyone
Yeah.
listening.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, all-star cast, right? And it was like every time a new white man turned around, it was another star.
Yep. It was so funny to just see all of these like, huge names and then like, some smaller names just pop up constantly. I mean, we all know, I think I've talked about him as much as I
Mhm.
can on this podcast, but I really love Josh Peck.
I know.
And I was so proud of him being in this Christopher Nolan
Yes,
film. He
I
talks about it.
feel.
It was the best thing ever. He like went back to took acting classes after some of
Oh,
his reported flops. He said that. And he's like doing it now. And
good for
I'm
him.
just so proud of him in a way that I feel like is borderline inappropriate since I don't know this man at all. But
No, I feel
I'm
like
proud of
that's
him.
that's sweet. That's really genuine. And
Mhm.
also like he's on our list of like dream guests someday,
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think like yeah, there's always like celebrities who I think you like just connect to
Mhm.
emotionally. Like I feel like that way about Lindsay Lohan.
Mhm.
I've
Yeah.
told you about my recurring dream where I like get
Yep.
through to her and save her. I think like you just have that with people. I'm
Mhm.
feeling more and more like that about Paris Hilton after watching her show. So good for Josh Peck.
Yeah, yeah, big win
Good
for
for
him.
him.
Love to see
Big
it. But
win.
yeah, the president, from Scandal,
Oh,
what's his name?
Fitz.
Fitz was
Oh,
in
Tony
it.
Goldwyn is his real
Yep.
name. But I was like, oh, there's Fitz. That
Yep.
was hard for me to see him in a political role, but not be Fitz.
I
I kept
know.
getting confused. I was like, oh, there's the president. Wait, no, he's not the president.
I wonder
You
if
know,
he's like a little stuck in what is it called? Typecast.
typecast. Maybe.
Like in political roles. I don't know.
Maybe. I will say with this movie, it kind of reminded me of like again, I would say, is it my favorite movie of all time? No, sorry. I loved the cinematography.
Yes, stunning.
The music, I think, was my
Yep.
favorite part.
Yep.
And like when the bomb finally went off, how it was dead silent,
Yep.
all the imagery, like that stuff I loved. I think that
Mhm.
was my favorite part of the film. This isn't my favorite like genre.
Yeah.
And I always just get confused in movies like this. It reminded me of the first season of Succession, where there's just like a bunch of white men in uniforms or all wearing the
Mhm.
same black and blue colors. I have a hard time keeping track of everyone
Right.
when there's like present day and then we do flashback, then we do flash forward, then we have black and white, then we have color. Like I did have a hard time keeping track of like what's going on
Yeah.
exactly. And maybe that's on me because I am not a huge like history person. I
I
feel
feel
like
the same way.
yeah. I feel like after spending so long studying medicine, like everything else I ever learned has kind of like fallen out of my
Mhm.
brain. This makes me want to learn more about it. Like I want to read the
Yeah.
book now.
Yeah, I really like historical fiction,
Me too.
in the novels. Like I like a story along with historical facts, and I think this like was that, but I'm really and it's like you were saying, it's a me problem. Like I don't know enough about communism and like I know that
Yeah.
was like,
Or-
I that was bad and like a lot of people would call on their neighbors and oh, the commies and like all of that stuff. Like I know loosely that was like fears that people had. There were lists,
Yeah.
there was like all that happening. But I think this movie was interesting and just like it highlighted a time that I'm like unfamiliar with. And like that's my
Yeah.
problem. And maybe people who are very much familiar with this time like appreciated it more. But that's where I was
Yeah.
getting lost. Like
Right.
with
And I
all
feel like
the hearings,
yeah.
I was like, what's happening? Who are these people and why is this important?
Right. Like why are we having these hearings? And it seemed like a big like dog and pony show to like revoke his security access. And then
Mhm.
I was like, oh, okay. And then what? Like and
Right.
again, I think that's just like my own ignorance. Um I do think it's interesting timing for this to be released when in present day there is still a lot of talk like in the news about like China and Russia and all the things, and I feel like it's probably all connected and I just need to learn more about it. Um Portia, then you would love Killers of the Flower Moon. I keep recommending this. The book is so good. It reads
Yeah.
like a novel, but it's all historical, all
Oh,
accurate.
I'm
Like,
thank you for the reminder. I'm gonna get it like now. I'm gonna order it today. I'm gonna do
oh,
it.
you could borrow it. I'll give it to you tomorrow.
Oh yeah, okay. Do
I
that.
have. It's really good. But again, like another movie, maybe we should cover another like
Mhm.
super long movie. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of how I felt about this movie, I
Yeah.
guess. I was
Yeah,
like, okay.
I feel like I'm in the know. Like I have participated
Mm,
now fully in Barbenheimer weekend. Like
right.
I'm on the pulse of the Oscars. I get it, but
Yeah.
like it's just, everyone has their taste. I think the movie was beautiful, like well done,
Hmm.
the acting was good, the cinematography was fantastic. Like so I get it, but like the story, it just not it's I'm not a fan.
It's not my favorite thing. And it was so long. I think if we had done it in 2 hours, we could have still gotten the
Mhm.
plot.
Yeah.
And maybe it would have captured my attention a little better. And again, maybe that's a me problem, my attention span. I had to watch it like over a 4-day period because it's just
Mhm.
like I have a hard time sitting still for that long and focusing. Kept having to rewind because I would like, my mind would wander off. And then I'm like, oh,
Right.
wait, who is this guy? What's going on here?
Mhm.
Um, but all that being said,
Yeah, here we are.
we
So we're going to
thought,
analyze them, like the characters as best we can, like doing a little, Wikipedia research, doing a little bit like, just like general analysis. These things are not based on fact, and obviously they never are, but like I just, the
yeah,
story is based in on a true story. So I think,
right.
whatever we say today is just like us kind of making wild
Speculating.
theories about what we
Yeah, we're just
think.
right, exactly. Based on, I think, what we see in the movie, we'll try to sort of delineate what we saw in the movie and sort of what we found out on our own. And if we were surprised or maybe not surprised,
Mhm.
we're going to pick 4 main characters. And then at the end, also talk about like what we think it must be like to work on a weapon of mass destruction.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
got to be stressful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
So
so.
starting with J. Robert Oppenheimer, played beautifully by Cillian Murphy, his skin is always just very shiny and wrinkle free.
I
Have you
find him to
noticed
be
this?
very attractive.
I can't decide.
Mm.
Like I feel like maybe, and then I feel like he might kill me in my sleep for some reason.
I think it's just like his eyes are so
Yes.
piercing, and it's like it's
Yes.
not just the color, it's like they look into your soul. And I watched a little bit of Peaky Blinders
Okay.
on Netflix. It's like again, it's like historical, but like he's the kind of like, badass in it, and like it's
Hmm.
just, it's a type.
Hmm. Well, maybe I
It's a
got to watch
type.
that to like, think he's hot. But I remember him from that Rachel McAdams movie on the plane.
Mm.
Where he was like a stalker and trying to kill her. So that's
Ooh.
probably why I feel like
Yeah, I
that.
didn't see that.
Um, I think it was called Red Eye. Maybe you shouldn't. It might freak you out. But
Good to
anyway,
know.
so what do you think about Oppenheimer? Like, what do you gather about him from the film?
Okay. So from the film, it changed thing back to his earlier like schooling. I
Mm-hmm.
get the vibe, and this is, not really the best language to use, but I'm like getting like a mad scientist. Like
Okay.
so smart, you know, so intellectual. Like his brain just operates, I think, from the really, if we're thinking about DBT, like the logical part of his brain. Like I don't think he's like
Right.
really in wise mind. I don't think he's often in his emotion mind. I think he's like, going off of just like his intellect and logic, and then like our instincts when he's like, having sex and stuff like that. But
Mm.
I just picked up on that. I would make guesses that he probably doesn't have like the best interpersonal skills. He's probably not like
Mm-hmm.
great if he was a doctor at bedside manner. Like I think
Right.
he's like a true kind of stereotypical like scientist who,
Scientist.
that's what he was like almost made to do.
I found myself wondering, and again, this is all speculation, wondering if he might fall on the autism
Hmm.
spectrum. Like be, again, like really struggle maybe with social
Yeah.
interpersonal cues, with making social connections. I could see him, and sometimes he would say things very bluntly, very honestly, but in a way that was like off-putting to other
Yeah.
people and maybe not quite realize it. Then at other times, he was more thoughtful, like especially at the end when he was talking to the president, he was, able to describe how he was feeling in a thoughtful way that sort of, I think, argues against him being on this spectrum. But that was one thing I found myself wondering. And I think, many times it seems like, I don't know, actually. I think that's an overgeneralization, but it almost sounds like, he's depicted as having like such a high IQ, being so book smart, so intelligent that there's like not room for the social piece.
Hmm.
And I think like we see that maybe anecdotally, but I don't know if that's like true. Like, I don't think that's accurate that like your brain only has room for like one
Right.
type of intelligence, right?
Because he also, I think when he is, you're right, when he's answering like some of the questions in that room, that we kind of keep going back to with Fitz
Fits. Yeah.
in it from
I
Scandal, like
wanted Olivia Pope to like
I know,
walk
just
in
walk
in
in
her
and
white
fix it, right? And fix it for
bring
Oppenheimer.
some
But like
popcorn and red wine for us all.
exactly. He was more thoughtful than I think, like if we're using that stereotype, then I think would be possible. Like he
Right.
was, well spoken. I think he like could was like thinking through what he was saying. It wasn't just like answering the question, like, well, I
Right,
don't
right,
understand what you're saying. Like
right.
he had the ability to kind of get depth. He and we'll get to this now or later, but like, when he found out that Jean had died, like he was
Oh, he was
very
devastated.
emotional.
Right,
Like so he demonstrates appropriate emotions. I think, maybe
right.
it's a product of his childhood. Like maybe,
We
you
didn't learn
know,
anything about his
that's what I
childhood.
mean.
Like,
Like,
where is his relationship with his mother?
right.
In 3 hours, we don't get a mother-son relationship? Like, come
Hmm.
on. What's the big whoop about
Right.
Oppenheimer?
Yeah, we need what's his attachment style? It's like we don't know. We're just
Oh.
guessing. But
Right. Is he just like using these women as objects? Like, does he have some narcissism? I would imagine, again, we always come back to this question. Like, is he displaying narcissistic traits because of the environment he's in? That he's like been placed on this
mm,
pedestal as being super intelligent, the leader, the director. Is that why? Like, I could make the argument he's using the women, Jean, Kitty, kind of as objects for his own personal gain without really thinking about how do his actions affect them. And the whole thing at the beginning with like poisoning his professor, I was
yeah, that
fascinated
yeah,
by this.
that just like it kind of comes out of nowhere. Again, just based on like we don't have a lot of like, thinking back to like Saltburn, it's like we get more of
Mhm.
the full story. Like we understand,
Yeah.
loosely like what events led to what events. But it's like in this way, it's
Right.
like, well, what led to that? Like why
I
did he
think
do this?
I feel like all they depicted was like he was trying to do his experiment and it wasn't working. And then they all wanted to go to this lecture by some fancy smart person. And then the teacher was like, everyone can go, but you, Robert, you have to stay and restart your experiment. And I would imagine he felt like
Mm.
humiliated, embarrassed, angry. So then you see him go and get the potassium cyanide injected in the apple.
Like
It
that's
seems
serious.
that's
Right?
really
Like
serious.
this is a serious like thing. It's not like he yelled at him. It's not like he left and slammed the door. It's not like he wrote a review your rate your professor online. Like he literally wanted to like poison him, like to kill him. Like that's not normal.
Interestingly, right? So we see this playing out, and then interestingly, way at the end, we find out that like Strauss, it had a similar reaction to comments Oppenheimer made,
Right.
right? So we're seeing this like big reaction to interpersonal conflict.
Mhm.
Dun 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 dun. What do we think they could all benefit from here?
DBT, right?
100%. Dialectical behavioral
Mhm.
therapy would be great across the board for every single character in this
Yeah.
movie. I don't think it existed quite yet.
No.
But they're all having very big reactions to feeling humiliated and
Mhm.
embarrassed and cut down. And I think, like, again, it sucks when like you have a teacher or an authority figure or peer, whoever, like say something to you that makes you feel bad about yourself. It's not normal to then go and try
Right.
to kill them,
Right.
you
Right.
know? But it seemed to me, so then right off the bat, I was like, oh, is he a sociopath? Is that why this movie's so interesting? And then it is like, he is working on the atomic bomb. So like, don't you have to have some degree of sociopathy to, like, be okay with doing that?
I know so that part to me is like the black and white thinking and like the compartmentalization, which
Yeah.
again, like are these, and some people really, reported after making the bomb, like, really moral wounds from it. But like for
Yes.
him going on kind of back and forth, like he sees the signing petition thing that, people have signed right before he's meeting with Truman, or like the higher
Mhm.
up person.
Mhm.
And like you kind of see him like question it, but it
Yes.
says that he's never come out and said that he's regretted like making it. He's like said it in other ways. Like he said like we should like not have atomic bombs, like people should like work to, like destabilize them or whatever that means. But like he's never said that he regrets doing this. And I don't know if that's
Yeah.
just because if he did, like he would like fall apart. Like he can't go there. Like it's so
Yeah.
painful. But or it's
Right.
just like again that black and white thinking, like, well, I'm a scientist, I created this, like I'm not the one who dropped it,
Right.
like I didn't do that, like. And I think
Right.
that's where kind of the debate is, like we're just creating it. He like kind of keeps saying to the people who are like questioning it or thinking about stopping, when he kind of goes into that room where all those people are, and with the
Yeah.
woman standing up in front, like
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
But then it's like, also does seem like they know why they're creating it. They're not just like,
Right,
I got a grant and
right,
I'm working on this, missile or
right.
something. But then I guess that could extend, right? And you could say, well, everyone who's working in defense on weapons knows why they're creating it. And again, it's like, it is kind of fascinating to think about, like, how do you as a human compartmentalize that? Like, I would imagine you have to have a really strong intellectualization
Mm.
defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have really
Right.
strong ability to deny and repress those emotional questions in order to keep doing it. And we do see that here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we do see that. And it's like, okay, so why was Oppenheimer drawn to this kind of work versus still doing physics and math things in a way that didn't involve bombs? Like,
Right.
what's the draw here? Right. And like, what I kept thinking as well, like, gosh, a lot of these people probably are going to have what we call moral injury,
Mm-hmm.
like in the psychology field of like, we see this a lot with soldiers returning to war who are struggling with PTSD, that often it's, again, not to downplay how horrific the physical trauma is, but oftentimes the emotional trauma, that moral injury that a lot of soldiers deal with, and that leads to sort of like longer term symptoms of PTSD, is related to like, just how do you sit with being like, I
Right.
killed people, I killed innocent people, how do you sit with that, right?
Well,
And
and
a
that's
lot
the
of
piece with these bombs, I think too. It's like the it wasn't just like I'm shooting at someone who's shooting at me.
at
It's like
me,
they
right?
killed so many civilians with the bombs, and like that's the piece that I think a lot of the scientists who were kind of backing out of it were like, this isn't a bullet. This isn't a, we're not dropping a bomb like on a warship. Like we're dropping it
Right,
in like a city where it's like, yeah, like
right,
maybe there's some like, again, we're categorizing like, oh, they're all bad. But like you have to then believe that they're all bad. Like
right, and
everyone in
so
that
right,
country
so
is
then it
bad.
right, and that's where you're just like, "Huh," right? Um, and so and how do you deal with that? I really wish the movie had gotten into that more.
Yeah.
I feel like we were getting into it toward the end, but, like, that's the movie I wanna watch,
Hmm.
not the hearings. Like,
Right.
okay, fine. Like, Strauss has a
Yeah.
vendetta, Oppenheimer said something that embarrassed him and made him mad, and so he's held on to it forever, and now he wants to screw him over. All right, great. But, like, I wanted to know more about how are they psychologically dealing with this, and how did they deal with it
Hmm.
for the rest of their lives?
Right, because I think what I didn't know, which was interesting, was that the bomb, like they were initially making the bomb to outrace Germany, and so like this was, there
Mm,
was a lot of, it seems like there was a lot of Jewish scientists in the film who were like,
right,
I understand their, desire to
right.
work on this. I also saw online, that not in the movie, that some of the money that Oppenheimer had donated that was being questioned was actually to get German scientists out of Germany. like safely, who are trying to
Mm.
flee Germany. And like that's, wonderful, I'm assuming, but like a lot of the pushback came when Germany had already like put the white flag up. And then they kept going, and now the bomb was going to be for
Oh,
something else. Um,
yeah.
which I just thought was that like that's where a lot of people were like, wait a minute, like now I don't feel comfortable doing this anymore. I also just like the character, one of the scientists, he played the main mathematician in the movie in the show Numbers. Did you ever see that? It was like this guy who solves crime with math.
No, but was he the friend from 10 Things I Hate About You?
Um, I don't know.
Let me Google him
Yeah,
really
so
quick.
yeah,
Did you
while you're
notice that the
looking,
friend from 10 Things I Hate About You is in there?
no.
Yeah, it is. That's the guy.
Oh, it is? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So I know him from Numbers, and he kept telling, which I thought was just interesting, like Oppenheimer, like he kept giving him food, like reminding him to eat. Um,
Yeah.
and like just, is he like one of those people who, again, like I'm loosely just talking, but like was obsessively, gets obsessive on something and like forgets. Like he has this one
Oppenheimer,
track
I think for
mind.
sure. I think for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Yeah, and I mean, we see him, like, obsessively chain smoking.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see him eat very much. I could definitely see he's got a one-track mind that he's focused on.
Yep.
And my question kept being, why? Why bombs? Why are you doing this? Now, especially knowing that about, like, the timing of it, you keep going. And then even, like, he couldn't wait for the 6th, right? When they were planning
Right.
to drop it. Remember, he was, like, really eager to hear the news that it got dropped. And then there was all
Yes.
this jubilation, this celebration. Then he's on the cover of Time. Like, and I'm just like, is he okay? Like,
It's like a
how is
weird
he?
thing to be celebrated for. I mean, it just is. Like,
Yes.
it's not like, oh,
Yeah.
the inventor of the light bulb. Like, yeah, you made electricity. It's like, no, you're in the inventor of this bomb that, like, yes, like, I think,
Could
again, if we
destroy the
look
world.
at it this way, like, oh, he ended the war. Like, that has to be your perspective, or else you are, which he used some quote that I now wish we had about, him being like the harbinger of death almost, right? He like
Yes.
said that.
Yeah.
It is a quote from a book, but like, he again like so you are aware though of what you're doing, but then I think that's
Yeah.
compartmentalized, and now it's just like, no,
Or
i'm
is it?
i'm
Or is the thirst for power
mm,
that great? Is that the
yes,
goal?
I think so.
Like, is that actually the goal? And I
Hmm.
think, like, seeing the earlier scene where he's like attempting to poison his professor makes me think, like, it might be.
Right, because
That might
again,
really
like
be
that's
part of it.
not normal. And then again, I learned online that he was being treated for depression in his college years after the Apple incident. I'm not saying that they're tied. It's just, the loose things that I saw online
Mhm.
about him. And like, it was also just interesting of the times, not surprising, like a more psychoanalytic, you're kind of like free
Mhm.
association is Freud. A lot of like
Mhm.
this newer stuff has not come out yet.
So again, so why don't we have anything about his mother? Like, that would have been, like, prime
Yeah.
psychoanalytic
Yep.
material,
Hmm.
okay? And then I'm
That's a good point.
sure you could just keep going with, like, "Man, that mushroom cloud looks like a penis when it
Yeah.
explodes," and there's, like, the power right there and just
Yep.
the phallic nature of it, and, like,
Hmm.
Freud would have a heyday with that.
Yes. Oh yeah. Freud would love that.
Mm,
Freud loved penises.
yes,
Fun fact. But
that is a fun
so yeah, and
fact.
then we see, all of this, like just it's interesting who he's kind of like connecting with. So he meets Jean Tatlock, who
Mhm.
is we find out online she's in medical school in real life, training to be a psychiatrist.
I know,
And
like, I wish,
she
like, again, the movie's 3 hours, we didn't get any of that?
mhm. And I think that's like interesting, even if it was just like a little tidbit, like, oh, I'm going
You
back to
could, yeah,
school. Like, I just thought it made it more interesting. And so she like
100%.
seems, like she has some demons, right? She has some depression. She seems like she struggles a little bit also interpersonally, some attachment stuff there, like with her wanting to be close to him, but then pushing him away. Like I guess he proposed to her numerous times. He always brought her flowers. She was throwing them out. It was like, why is that?
Mhm.
Like you want this connection, but then you're pulling away.
Right, and
Um,
then she said to him, like, "Stop calling or stop answering when I call," and he says, "I'll always answer."
mhm,
So then it's like, "Okay, guys,
right,
there's some communication issues here,
right,
and we're not, like, not on the same page about, where we want this relationship
right.
to go."
Yeah. And she, pops up later when she calls him, and he like puts a boundary up because he is having a child. He's like married now to Kitty. And then she, it seems like directly then kind of ends her life soon after that. And then he, blames himself. He breaks down in front of Kitty. Kitty, I thought I liked what she said back to him. She was like something about you're not the victim here. Like you did like to me, as in like you cheated on me. Not like I
Right,
don't
right,
think maybe she was saying that you did this to her, but like
right.
I thought you
Like
now
you
you want me
wanted
to
me
comfort
to
you. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And yet she stuck around, Kitty. I thought
Why
she
do you
was, like,
think?
one of the most interesting characters, I thought
Mhm.
was Kitty. Um, I mean, gosh, the times, like, it looks like she had 2 young children. She seemed quite depressed. I really wondered if she had postpartum depression,
Yeah.
that
Detached from
maybe
her
just
son, right? That
yeah.
scene.
Or when he comes home and she's like,
Yeah.
he's
Well,
crying at
yeah,
me.
that's true.
I also though think that like it can feel like that when you have a baby
Yeah.
who's fussy all day. Like it's a
And
lot. It can
with the
weigh on you.
times, like, I don't think by any means was, like, trying to be an equal
Hands-on
partner.
dad.
Yeah, like, he
Right.
was very
No.
much so like, "What do you like, I have to do this? Like, I have to go check on our son, like, that's weird," and then
Right.
he ends up taking the child to, like, a friend to take care of again, like, that felt
That
like,
was so
okay, Kitty
bizarre
needs
to me.
more time or maybe it's worse, but, like, yeah, her just being like, "I need a break," totally normal, but if there's anything, like, deeper, which it alluded to, I don't know if that's his
Yeah.
interpretation and it's wrong or
Right.
if there was, but I don't know.
And so did they leave the baby with the friend for a period of time?
I think so?
I think so. Again, the movie is so long, it's hard for me to remember all the details, but, that made me think, like, maybe there is some postpartum depression going on,
Mhm.
and again, like, gosh, we still struggle to treat that in the modern day. I can't even imagine what
Right.
treatment, if any, was available back then, and it just seemed like she was just really down
Yeah.
and irritable and drinking a lot of
Mhm.
the movie.
Yep.
Um, I mean, she didn't have financial independence, so where would she have gone? Like, what would she
Mm.
have done? I think
I
she was
guess just
stuck.
go back to your parents, but, like, I
We
don't
don't
know
even
much
know if she
about
had
them.
parents or
Mhm.
where they are or what all that
Yeah.
entails, but, I can't imagine how just devastating it must have felt for her to realize
Mm.
he went to Gene.
Right.
Um,
And then that scene, right, when he's giving the testimony and, about Jean
oh,
because she was, like, part of the Communist Party and, like, Kitty's kind of watching, and it's just, like, how she must have felt, right, like, seeing Jean on top of, Oppenheimer, like,
yes,
having sex with him.
right, right. Though that part of the movie, like that those types of things I thought were really good.
Mhm.
Um, but that yeah, and then I was like, "Why is she in there listening to all this?" Like, I just don't
Yeah, that
understand
felt
how these,
weird.
like, questioning things go. I think you came to find that unfortunately Kitty did struggle quite a bit, it seems
Yep.
like, with substance use disorder, with like
Mhm.
alcohol, with drugs. It looks like she did develop pancreatitis. Um, and she smoked a lot. So it seems like she broke many bones because of car crashes and falling. So she was plagued by a lot of
Mhm.
demons.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't be surprised if Oppenheimer drank too, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, we saw and I think too, just thinking of the times, like, I think that and maybe this is, like, a known fact, and I'm just, like, slow to the party, but I think there was much more drinking, like, back then with just it being such a norm. Like, even thinking of, like, the diets that were in, like, a magazine, it's like, have,
Oh
1
yeah,
hard-boiled
yeah,
egg
yeah.
with breakfast and 1 glass of wine, have 1
Right,
grapefruit for lunch and 1 glass of wine, and then for dinner, like,
right,
have this and 2 martinis. Like,
right.
it was just a thing. You see them, always making martinis, everyone's drinking, like, I think if you had means, you had, like, a very well-stocked liquor cabinet. I think that's, like, a
Mhm,
status thing.
mhm,
But and, it still kind of is now, I guess, but, like, I think everyone was drinking a lot. Even depicted in the movie, we see him making martinis, for
mhm.
maybe not for himself, but, I think it was just something that you did, like,
Yeah,
at
and I do
night.
think that was the age of, like, Mommy's Little Helper, the
Yep.
barbiturates, which I believe, unfortunately, is what Jean used in her suicide attempt, I
Mhm.
think they said, but again, I could imagine maybe Kitty was on those, for, like,
I
quote,
think they were
unquote, "treatment."
common, right?
Right, they were at that
Yeah.
time, and then, combining that with alcohol is incredibly dangerous.
Mhm.
You need to overdose, and you can die from respiratory depression, which means you stop breathing.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of substance use, like, sorta lightly depicted in the movie,
Yeah.
nods to Kitty in particular struggling
Mhm.
with it, but I wouldn't be surprised if all of them struggled in some degree. We certainly see Oppenheimer's chain smoking
Right.
constantly. I
Right.
don't think there was any, NRT or nicotine replacement therapy available back then. There is now.
Mhm.
Um, so Portia, I know you had wanted to also just focus a little bit on the suicide note that you were able to find from Jean.
Yeah, I thought it just, kind of puts when people are feeling really hopeless and, suicide is kind of like the only option. I think it gives like a unfortunately sad but accurate picture of how one might feel. So part of her quote and her note is I'm disgusted with everything. So again, that's like, feeling hopeless. I'm disgusted with everything. So kind of, the black and white thinking to those who loved me and helped me, all love and courage. So, you want to put your loved one at ease, even though they won't be. I wanted to live and give, and I got paralyzed somehow. And I just
Mm,
thought, like, the word paralyzed, I think, is just like a
it's so
profoundly
fitting.
sad way of making it really clear how someone feels, like, so like,
Yeah,
paralyzed, like, like, unmoving, like, there's nothing you
right.
can do, it's not like, "Oh, this part works, this doesn't," it's like, it's just this feeling of, like, your entirety is
Mm,
stuck, and there's nothing that you can
yeah,
do, um
right. Yeah, I think people struggling with depression clinically certainly feel like that. And that's where it can be really like
Mm.
kind of damaging to say things that might seem well meaning, like, well, just get outside, go for a walk,
Right?
eat healthier, do something for yourself, get a little me time, do some self care.
Mhm.
Because all of that takes like time, energy, effort, money. And when you are so like under the boulder of depression, i- it's like that can be really inaccessible. Right. And I think,
Right.
yeah, that word paralyzed, I really speaks to that.
Mm, and I think, even just thinking about depression, I was, talking a lot about it this week with it being so simple to even you took the words out of my mouth with telling someone like, "Oh, just take a shower, like just get out of bed, just get outside, like just literally walk outside the door." And it's like that seems so simple, but it's like if they could, they would. Same thing with like
100%.
you see like depression rooms, it's almost called, like so it could be your bedroom, a kitchen that's just like a mess. Like, it's
Um,
dark, it's
dark.
dirty, there's stuff
Mhm.
everywhere, there's piles of things, and it's like, "Oh, just, like, start the dishwasher." Like but, like, they would if they could, and they would've. Like,
Right.
nobody
Exactly.
likes to live in a place like that.
Right.
It's they're
Right.
doing it because there's no, other way to manage it right now, and
Yeah.
I think trying to take small manageable steps, but also what I like to kind of focus on with that is like the judgments also don't help. So if you are setting unreasonable expectations of yourself, like showering, like maybe and again that feels like that should be easy, but like it's not. If my expectation is I'm going to shower today and then I don't, I then feel so
Mm.
bad about myself. I feel like a failure. I feel even worse, and it's like that's the
Yeah.
piece that it just like kind of keeps the cycle going. Versus like
Right. And
can you say to yourself like I did my best and like my best is like 5% out of 100 and like
and
it's
being
low,
okay
but
with that for now, right?
right.
Because depression clinically just like filters everything through a negative self-critical
Mhm.
lens. And so like when other people around you are frustrated or not understanding, it's like you have no idea what it's like in my
Right.
mind. It's like I'm
Right.
already beating myself up to that degree. And that's where I always tell my patients that is where things like medication,
Yes.
ECT, other types of interventions
Mhm.
biologically can be really helpful. I often tell my patients, like, when you're struggling with something like depression, by the time you come to see me for like a
Mm.
medication evaluation, you're at the bottom of a really steep hill. And it feels like it takes so much more effort to even get halfway up.
Right.
And a lot of times the depression disease itself robs you of that energy and ability to do it. Like
Mhm.
everything takes so much more energy that you just don't have. And things like medication or ECT or TMS, depending on what the treatment
Ketamine,
is,
right?
ketamine, can get you halfway up the hill.
Mhm.
And then once you're there, it's so much easier to use all the other coping skills,
Right.
take the shower, to clean your room, to do the other things
To
that
ask
help
for
get you
help.
over the
Mhm.
hill. Exactly. But that's where, treatment is so needed.
Right.
And that is just what happens with the disease of depression. That's
Yeah.
not like a moral failing on behalf of that person or a laziness or a selfishness. Like you just can't access it.
Yeah.
It's like, someone with diabetes, they could control their diet as best they could and their insulin still might not be
Exactly.
regulating. So you need some medicine. It
Yeah.
just is what it is,
And
you
that's the
know,
treatment
but
plan. Like that the
yeah,
recommended treatment for depression is medication and therapy, you know?
right.
Um, it's
Sure,
not,
some
you
more
know.
mild forms of depression can respond to therapy
Mhm.
alone, you know, but once you get to a certain point, once you're at the
Right.
bottom of that hill, it can really help.
Mhm. Yeah. It just makes things it makes the cognitive work easier to access when you're getting some of the
100%.
chemical help, inside.
Yeah,
And,
it
like
softens that negative lens,
mhm,
right? Not everything is so negative. Like, you don't
right.
feel so negative.
So at this point in history, we're at, like, World War II, they had, you know, psychoanalysis,
Psychoanalysis.
barbiturates. What was
Mhm.
do you know what was out there in terms of other medications? Like, were SSRIs around yet, Prozac, or was that much
No.
later?
Yeah, no, the first SSRI was Prozac, which is fluoxetine. That didn't come out till 1988.
Mm.
So that's no, we were like decades
Yeah.
away from that.
Yeah.
We might have had things like MAOIs. Um, Monoamine oxidase inhibitors were first introduced in the 50s. So that's probably, if you had access to it, maybe
Mm.
the medication of choice. But those are tricky. Those are tricky medicines to take. There's a lot of interactions with medication, with other medications, food, things like that. So
What's an example of one of those?
um, one is called a newer one, the one that I've prescribed the most because we don't use them as often anymore, is called selegiline.
Hmm.
You can use that specifically to treat things in Parkinson's disease. So they've
Okay.
found that they can use these medications for other things now. You can have a patch, um, things like that. Some of the first generation MAOIs that would have come out around then are things like phenelzine, isocarboxazid, and
Mm.
tranylcypromine. And again, there's different generations of MAOIs. Some are what we call non-selective, others are selective. The newer ones are more selective, so they're a little easier to use in terms of like you have to avoid certain foods
Mm.
that release monoamines because you have too much in your system. You can get what's called toxicity, and that can be like dangerous, if not fatal. So things like red wine, cured meats, types
All
of
the best
cheeses, like
things.
all the best things you have to avoid. Um, but anyway, so that's probably what they had going for them. I was looking at tricyclics. Um, Let me see. I don't think those would have been out yet. Well, those came to market in 1959, so we're getting there. Tricyclics sort of came after MAOIs.
Okay.
And again, those are antidepressants. They have, again, more side effects than like the SSRIs and things like that now. Um, So that's why we tend to use
Mm.
SRIs first, but then we will move to classes like TCAs or MAOIs if we need to. And they do work great for certain patients. They just are a little riskier, so you
Yeah.
have to be careful. Like tricyclics would be things like amitriptyline, diazepamine, doxepin, imipramine, nortriptyline, all the ipramine,
I know the
triptyline
lean,
kind of
tryptoline.
things. Yeah. So again, you might recognize some of those medications. They're used also to treat things like neurological things like headaches, nerve pain. They can be used for other things too. With the TCAs, the one of the main things we really monitor is its effect on the cardiac system. So again, you might get an EKG to check something called the
Mm.
QTC interval. That is why they can be fatal and overdose. So like I wouldn't be given that to Kitty, for example, or Jean maybe if she has a history of suicidality. Whereas like SSRIs, we don't worry about that as much. You don't have to check
Yeah.
EKGs to monitor them and things like that. So again, these are good classes of medication. They're older, they've been around longer, they just have more uh, potential like medical
Mhm.
issues or there might be harder to take because you have to avoid certain foods with the
Gotcha.
MAOIs and stuff.
AA was
Good question,
around
Portia.
then.
A was around,
So,
yeah.
you know, maybe they could have gone for some, you know, alcohol use treatment. Then, you know, it
Yeah.
was definitely more alcohol related, but it's kind of based off, or the origins are said to based off Carl Jung, which I didn't know.
AA.
AA. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Carl
They
Jung,
did
you know,
give
is a
shout outs to, like, Carl
yeah.
Jung and
Okay.
Freud at different parts in the
Mhm.
movie, but not
Yes.
specifically about
Yes.
AA. But yeah, there were some little shout outs.
Mhm.
Um, so as we start wrapping up, I feel like I do wanna spend a little time further exploring, like, gosh, what do you think it must be like psychologically to be
Mm.
involved with, like, creating a weapon?
I feel like you almost have to do I'm picturing it 2 ways, like, one is, like, you have to compartmentalize, like and I'm just thinking of, like, to live your life after, like, how can you
Yeah,
grapple with this? Like, one is, like, you
right,
compartmentalize and separate from it, as in, like, I'm the scientist, I'm not the one who dropped it, or
right,
you, like, do take some ownership of it and, like but what does that do to you? And do you then,
right.
like, for the rest of your career, as some of them did, you advocate, for the rest of your career, you're advocating for, people to dismantle all, the atomic weapons and working with the UN. Like, do you,
Yeah.
talk about it in psychoanalysis for the rest of your life? Like, I don't know.
Do
I
you
think there's
feel
almost
like
like
a
2
murderer?
paths. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you feel like a murderer? Like, do you see yourself like that? Do you
mm,
not? Like, I guess those would be the questions you explored in therapy. I could imagine you would have some degree of, like, trauma
yeah,
symptoms, right? Like,
yeah.
we often think about people who are victims of trauma having things like PTSD, but, I think the perpetrator, or, like, creator, at least, like, in a case like this, gosh, I don't know how you sit with
Well, it's
it.
such a loss of control, right? So if you're thinking of them, like, as
Mm,
the perpetrator, like, it's almost like they become the victim because they lose control of what it's for. Like, they're not I
mm,
made it, right? And then I do it. Like, I'm in control the whole time versus, like,
yeah,
"Oh, I made it and now it's taken from me. I have no say. I have nothing about it. There's
right.
nothing I can do." And that's the piece that's, like,
Mhm.
I think that makes those PTSD symptoms kind of feel, um,
Like,
more
maybe come out.
likely. Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually a great point because, like, we saw with the apple when he's poisoning it, he had control over that, and then he regretted it and had control over taking it back, right?
Yep.
Whereas with the bomb, he has control over working to create it, and then he gives it away, and that's it.
Right.
And we did see him maybe try to take some control, perhaps by visiting the president. I couldn't tell if the president, like, wanted to see him to say, like,
Mhm.
"Thank you,
Yeah.
congratulations." Like, I think it
And
was
he
like
didn't
that.
get that.
Right,
And then
but
he
I
was, like,
think
mad.
right, but I think, like, it's because I don't know, I thought maybe that I don't know again, but I thought, like, is that the president inviting him because he's on the cover of Time, kinda like the Super Bowl champs go to the White House kinda thing, like, "Here, you get to meet the president and
Right.
shake his hand and get a picture and get a medal or something." But then he used the opportunity to be like, "I feel like I have blood on my hands."
Mm.
And then the president to wave his little handkerchief in front of his face so rudely pissed me off, and then it almost felt like the president was offended that Oppenheimer felt responsible, right? Because then the president even said, like, no one's going to remember who created the bomb. They're only going to remember who dropped it. As if it's like he's like beating on his chest, like,
Right.
I'm the one
Which it
taking the
feels
credit.
weird.
It's weird.
And, like, for
Weird.
him to then how do you then on the military side, like, you did not make it, but you did drop it. You put the order in, you don't need to be in the
Like
plane to
Matt
feel
Damon's
responsible.
character.
Exactly, Matt Damon and the president. The president, it just feels more, like, narcissistic, like, he's just on the
Yeah.
power trip. Um,
But that's where, like we've talked about before, like, you do kind of have to have some
you
degree of
I think you have
narcissism and
to.
sociopathy to get to such a high level
Yeah.
and to know, like, you're pushing that button and people are dying, like, tens of thousands, sometimes
Right.
even more than that, of people who are innocent, women, children, innocent men are dying. Like, there's, like, some element of that because I think a
Mhm.
lot of people would just be like, "I will go work at a grocery store." Like, I'll
Yeah.
just teach. Like, I can teach physics. I don't need to get involved with this sort
Right.
of thing.
Right.
Interesting. I don't know. Anything else we wanna touch on?
I don't think so. I mean,
Not
I'm
the red
like
button. I'm
yeah.
not pushing it.
I thought it was so funny and, circling back to me being a fan, like, I loved that Josh Peck is the one who, like, did the test, like, he, like,
Mm,
pushed the button. I think he talked about, like, the takes for that and, like, getting it right. It was like his shining moment, but that, like you said, the cinematography, I loved how it was silent in that moment. I was questioning if any of them got radiation poisoning from working
I'm
on the
sure.
bomb, right?
I'm sure. I was
They
watching this with
must
my
have.
husband, and he was like, "How many of them do you think developed cancer, like, a couple
Yeah.
years
I
later?"
mean,
I
Oppenheimer did. He died of throat cancer.
I'm
I mean,
sure.
smoking or whatever, but still.
But also I thought, like, in terms of the cinematography, all the, like, as Oppenheimer's like moving through things, like going up to give this speech, like we see like those feet pounding, the
Yeah.
light, like he's a little disoriented. I felt like that was actually like a beautiful depiction of, I think, what he's going through psychologically.
Yes. I
And
forgot
like
about
he's,
those parts.
you know,
Mhm.
like he's going up to be like, you know, hailed and cheered and all the things. And he's seeing like people dying, or he's seeing like the ashy
Yep.
corpse. And I thought that was actually beautiful, and to me suggested he is grappling with this. He's
Mhm.
not just a full on, he's not incapable of feeling that, but I really wish we
Right.
would have gone there more.
Yeah. I
Maybe in
agree.
Oppenheimer too, we
Yeah.
could see him in therapy.
Yeah. You know, I will
Christopher
see what
Nolan, get on
happens.
it.
I
Yeah,
think
I
this
mean,
is gonna come
Chris,
out. I'm not sure if it's before or after the Oscars will premiere, but we know it's gonna win
it's
something,
gonna win
one of the
something, if
13
not a lot of
nominations.
things.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Christopher Nolan loves making such long movies. I like
Avatar, right?
Psychoanalysis Takes Forever.
Yeah.
No, 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 that's James Cameron. He
Oh,
Christopher Nolan did some of the Batman movies, but,
gotcha.
like, Psychoanalysis Takes Forever. So, like, get on it. Oppenheimer on the couch. I wanna
Yeah.
see it. I wanna
That would be
see
a
it.
good movie.
I wanna see his free associations, like, what
Mhm.
comes out.
So
Bet
let
it's a
us
lot of
know,
stuff
like,
about murder.
did you like Oppenheimer? Like, leave us a comment. Did you, like, find it interesting? Is this your, interest genre, or was it, like, fine if you even saw, or did you not and you're just listening to now be able to comment on it if it comes up in,
Mhm.
in conversation, but,
Yeah.
definitely not a favorite, but I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah.
Here we
Agreed.
are.
Cosign. I'm glad we're
All
done
right.
talking about it.
Well, make sure you follow along with us. You can subscribe to our show. Please leave a comment or a review, and make sure to rate us. We are also on Instagram and TikTok as Analyze Scripts Podcast. We do make some extra content there, but we will be releasing monthly as well. Some, what's upcoming. So make sure to check out those so you can watch along with us. But thanks
Yeah.
again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.